full-spectrum science clubs for girls, building pathways for women of color in biology.
When you were a girl, did you see yourself as a scientist?
I didn't really think about science and science as a career. I always thought science was fun. You got to like be hands-on and do experiments, but I never saw myself as becoming a scientist when I was a young girl.
I think, yeah, when I was little I could see myself that way. I really loved watching like documentaries and science shows and stuff on TV, and I was like, oh, it seems like such an exciting thing to do. It's like, oh, you could go out and travel the world and figure out things.
I don't think I saw myself as a scientist as a girl because there wasn't cool clubs like Spectrum where I knew that I could be a scientist. I knew that I liked science. I liked my science classes. I liked to be curious about the world and ask questions about the world. But the actual title scientist, I never really gave myself.
When I was younger, I didn't really like school that much. I didn't really like science. I was very shy and very unsure of myself, and I never ever would have expected that I would go on to college and, you know, pursue my bachelor's in science.
My parents always pushed me to be whatever I wanted to be, so I was like, I want to be a doctor. But when I got to high school, science was really hard, and I was like, I don't think I want to be a doctor anymore. This is too hard. So yeah, I didn't see myself as a scientist. But deep down inside, I think I knew I could be a scientist somewhere.
When and why did you decide to become a scientist?
I decided to become a scientist because I'd always enjoyed science, and I think I came to that realization probably in 6th grade when we got to dissect owl pellets, and I thought it was so cool that you could like dissect this little thing and pull out all of these bones and reconstruct this skeleton and be like, wow, this owl ate something that was a whole form at one time. And so that's, I think, when I was like, science is super cool, I want to always do science.
I had many different majors actually, and after each major I was like, you know, this doesn't feel quite right for me. And I couldn't quite figure out what I wanted to do with my life. As I started taking more science classes, I'm like, you know, it reminded me back of my childhood when I really liked science, and I finally decided this is the right fit, and then I declared my biochemistry major, and then after that I pretty much consider myself a scientist.
Ever since I was a young girl, I was always interested in science and nature, and I was fortunate to have like parents that, you know, fostered that interest in science, where, you know, we live close in the city, we live close to Golden Gate Park, so they got memberships to the Academy of Science like every year, and I would love it. I would never get tired of it. And so it's like ever since then I knew that I wanted to do science.
I decided to be a scientist when I was in college, and it was actually almost during my last year that I decided to be a scientist. But mainly it was because I knew that I loved it so much, and I just didn't know what to do with it. But in the end, I found research labs, and I started doing research with parasites. And it was from that moment that I knew that I wanted to be a scientist. I didn't want to be anything else. And ever since then, I've been doing research, and I'm on my way to become a professional scientist.
When a guy does it, it doesn't really matter. But when a girl does it, it's like, oh, hey, you did it. You know, like it was some surprising thing that I was good at math.
Because I feel awkward all the times, like around males when it's just me.
And I felt like maybe it was because I was a girl.
Have you ever felt you were treated differently because you were a girl?
There's definitely been times when I feel like I've been treated differently. I feel that there's still a pretty strong myth out there that girls are not as good at math and science. And from all of my studying and all of the classes I've taken, that is definitely not true. Girls and boys are equally good at science and math.
Science can be very independent in terms of like when you're in a class, you sometimes feel like you're on your own, but during labs you get to work with others, and that can be fun because you make friends. But at times I feel like sometimes the boys would take over and they would sort of give me direction, like, okay, you go get the materials, and then they got to do all the thinking and all the all the fun stuff.
I didn't start feeling that way until I was in college, and I started realizing that there were more males in most of my classes. And I mean, I've gotten a little bit, some comments here and there, like girls can't do science, but basically I just use that as fodder to like do better.
I went to a friend's medical school. It's called a white coat ceremony, where as a first-year medical student, they put on their white coats, and it's to like congratulate them on getting to medical school. And I was there for my boyfriend. And then his friend approached him and me and said, "Oh my gosh, like, is this your girlfriend?" And he's like, "Oh yeah." She's, "Oh, I knew she was too pretty to be a medical student." And so I was like, should I be offended or should I be complimented on that? And I think that stayed with me. Because I think it was meant to be a compliment, but at the same time it made me think about maybe my image isn't the image of someone who might be smart enough to get into medical school.
What was life like during middle school?
Middle school was fun. Lunchtime, double dutch, that's all I like to do.
My science class, my physical science class in 8th grade, all we did was watch videos. The teacher never really taught anything.
I didn't like my classes really. I did well, probably because it was an inner city kind of type environment, so we weren't challenged. It was like, you show up, you're doing well.
Middle school for me was a very tough time. Very tough time. I come from a really poor family, and that's never easy anyway, but I think in middle school especially it's kind of a tough time.
You remember it's a time when students are having these like hierarchies and like who's cool and who's not cool. I was sort of in the middle. I think I was starting to become what everybody was thinking of me as the nerd.
I was actually born in San Francisco, but I lived for 10 years in El Salvador, so I'm Salvadorian. So I came when I was 9 or 10. So when I got into middle school, I didn't speak any English, and it was a hard transition for me. So I was put into ESL classes, and I never had science in middle school. And I always saw the same amount of people around me, and I was never able to interact with the English speaker, so I felt really like an outsider.
When I was in middle school, my school was mostly Latinos, and when I went to high school it was the same thing. And I think it was when I went to college and started taking like chemistry and genetics, things like that, I saw less and less people of color in my science classes.
They either saw me as somebody who was really smart because I was really the only one there, a person of color, or they thought that I didn't belong there.
From the time that I started school till now, I was usually the only black person in most of my classes.
The further you get into science, math, the more you're the minority, the less you see of yourself.
I remember in high school we read, I think the book was The Color Purple, and after every single question the teacher would be like, "Farian, can you give us the black perspective?" Because I was the only black person in the class. And I would be like, I don't know. I grew up in the same homes as you. I go to the same school as everyone else in my school. I have the same type of parents, so I didn't really understand why I was being singled out.
I remember asking students like, hey, do you know about, say for example, this part of the experiment? And before they could answer, they would ask me, well, what did you get on the test? I'm not gonna answer that unless you tell me how well you did. And so I felt like I was out of place sometimes.
When we're in groups, people didn't necessarily want to work with me. I don't know if it was because I was Latino, but I kind of felt like that, like, why are all these people working together and they don't want me in their group?
Outwardly, I think people can't really see that I'm a person of color, and so that wasn't a huge factor for people in the community that I felt. But within my own family, I did experience some negative stuff because of that, and some biases from my own family. And that's, I think, hard to deal with too sometimes, because your own family's like, well, you're not as good. And that's difficult.
Most people who treated me differently were people of my own ethnicity. It was like I didn't grow up, I'm Mexican American, and I didn't really grow up with a lot of Mexican friends. They were off doing their own thing and didn't really want to have anything to do with me. I have no idea, but I think I've definitely been treated a lot different, maybe because of my nationality.
When I got into college, I felt like it was a lot easier because there was a lot of other people of color in my classes, but I have gotten certain comments here and there. I was talking to one of my colleagues about getting into dental school, and she said, oh, it'll be easy for you because you're black, and they'll let you in because you're black because there's not very many black applicants. And I said to her, it's not about me being black. I've spent the last 5 years of my life dedicating myself to my studies. There's been times that I wanted to go out and I couldn't go out because I had to go to the library. There's been times that I've spent hours in tutoring, or that I've looked on the internet to find an answer to a problem that has taken me all night. So if I get into dental school, it definitely is not because I'm black. It's because I've worked very, very hard over the past couple of years to do that. I think you just have to pick your battles and not let others' opinions of you make you think differently about yourself.
Have you ever failed a science class?
Yes, I have.
Like, oh my God. Yes. When I was in 5th grade, I failed my math class.
I have.
Yes. I failed a few science classes.
I have.
Oh yeah, plenty. So I failed, this is a nightmare story, but I failed chemistry, general chemistry, twice at City College. It took me 3 times to pass that class. And I remember going into office hours to the teacher, and he would just tell me to just forget it, like to just give up. It wasn't gonna happen.
It was my first semester in Berkeley, at UC Berkeley. And I thought, you know, my first semester, I can do calculus, I'll do stats, I don't know, I was trying to do all the really hard classes. The first semester of chemistry, and that's the one I failed because I was just not ready.
I have failed before, and I'm sad to say that. But, you know, I think in college there was a point in my life where I wasn't really focused on what I needed to do.
I absolutely hated algebra. It was so hard for me. I did not understand it. And it's funny because now I'm a math tutor, and I actually tutor most undergrad math classes up to calculus.
It's not fun to talk about, but I haven't technically failed a science class, but I did my first semester of chemistry, of general chemistry. I barely passed the class. I got like a C-, and I failed a couple of the exams. It was a very, very difficult class for me. But what I did was I got some extra help and some tutoring, and by the end of the class I passed. And then the second semester of general chemistry I actually got like an A- because of all the tutoring. So get tutoring, it really helps.
Science can be very difficult, and it's not about just like say being smart or, you know, loving science. It's also about knowing how to learn and knowing how to teach yourself in science. So yeah, I did fail science class, and I was devastated, but it was a learning experience. I realized how not to approach a science class, and from there I've been able to improve.
When you were in school, did you have any teachers that influenced you to get into science?
In middle school, I had this crazy teacher. She had like a lot of white hair. It was long and it was puffy, but she was great. When I remember she asked the class a question, and I was finally the one who got it right. And so she screamed, and she's like, oh my God. And she was yelling, and she's like, finally, finally. And so it's like the crazy teacher, but she was a lot of fun. But it was in college, actually, that a lot of my professors really pushed me to be in the sciences, especially because I was one of the few Latinos and Latinas in the major of microbiology, that they saw that I had potential to do something, and so they pushed me to really go into the sciences.
I think there was always teachers that influenced me to get into science, both directly and indirectly. For example, when I was in high school, I wasn't doing well in his class. It was chemistry, and an internship came up in the summer to work with scientists, and he nominated me, and I was really surprised because, you know, it was me and this girl who had like an A in the class, and I was thinking, why is he nominating me? I'm not that smart. But I think that maybe he saw something in me, because it was then that I realized that science was so cool. You can have a career in science and do well.
In high school, my high school biology teacher was very encouraging, and he said, you know, you're pretty good at science. You should consider that when you go into college. And even just like thinking about going to college, I think was a big influence from my teachers in high school, because they were like, no, you have to go to college, you got to do it. So I'm like, okay, I'll do it.
I don't think there really was a real pull towards, you know, getting people to do science, not when I was a kid. Fortunately, I really already had that passion. But what I did have in college was a really good mentor. Either my parents were scientists or professionals, or they didn't go to college even. So they didn't, you know, while they knew, you know, they supported my goals, they didn't know how to get me to where I wanted to be. So it really helped with having a mentor in college to guide me through the process of like what it takes to become a scientist.
My freshman year, I think it was either my freshman or sophomore year of college, I joined a biology class, and I was waiting outside in the hallway for the teacher to come, and a woman walks down the hall, and I think she was Chinese, and she had fiery red dyed hair, and she opened the door and she's like, okay, everybody go into the classroom, and she was our teacher. And I was so shocked that I had a female teacher, and that my female teacher had just this red crimson hair, dyed hair. She was really cool, she was really fun, and I'd never had a teacher like that. Most of my life I'd had white male teachers. And she's actually the one that told me that I should change my major from undeclared to being a biology major, and I ended up changing it because of her.
What is the thing you like most about science?
The thing that I really like about science is that you're allowed to be wrong. You can ask a lot of different questions about the world, and if you get one wrong, it just means that you figured out how something doesn't work. So it's okay to be wrong.
I like experiments. I like start with some predictions and at the end have some results.
I like working with experiments too because they're just really fun.
I see science as a puzzle, and I think that's why I really enjoy it, because I enjoy doing puzzles. And with science, even if not everybody knows the answer, you can figure out the answer.
What I like most about science is just knowing that I'm the first to discover whatever it is that I'm studying, and that nobody else has studied this before or determined this before. And it's like, it kind of gives me the feeling of like I'm an explorer, you know.
I like the experiments that we do, like with Biomedical Science, how we got to touch them and everything. It's also fun to learn about like random facts. So it's like you never knew that there was like a bug that size. So it's like, oh, something new.
Yeah, he's sleepy. So he's just like, and actually he's got this long nose that unrolls kind of like those New Year's flyers.
There's always something new to be discovered about science. There's never anything like, it's never just done, like, oh, this is science, this is how it is, and this is how it's always going to be. It's always being reinvented. It's always going to be, you know, explored even further, and that's what I love about it.
Is science real?
Sometimes science is a little bit hard to believe because there's a lot of things that you can't see, but it is real.
Yes, it's mysteries, but it's real.
You get results. That's the whole point, is to get results. And when you get those results, it becomes more real.
Every interesting thing that's around us that we've discovered and figured out, science has made that possible.
You go outside and it's everywhere. There's science in how a tree grows. There's science in having lunch, the way you digest your food. Science is everywhere.
You look at grass growing, that's science. Like, I mean, there's science to how that works. There's science to how your body moves. There's science to how you're actually watching this video. I mean, there's science in everything that's around you. So science is very real.
Have you ever gotten confused or frustrated when you do science?
Until this day, I always get confused about science.
Absolutely, yeah. Sometimes I'll spend a lot of time doing science homework or doing science experiments, and things don't go the way you want them to go.
You don't get the answers you think you should get, and those can be really hard times when you're like, oh my God, why am I a scientist? This is so difficult.
I remember being younger, and when I would get frustrated or confused, I would just think, maybe I'm stupid, maybe it's just me.
If you practice and you find people that can help you, getting past those times that are confusing or frustrating leave you with a real sense of achievement.
And it's kind of like a puzzle where, you always, have to figure out what's going on, but then finally at the end, when you figure it out or it works, it's just like the best thing in the world.
And that's what science is about. You do a lot of troubleshooting. Not everything works out the first time. And that's also, I guess, something that I do like about science, the troubleshooting, because you learn by doing it.
Can women be a scientist and have a family too? How does that work?
As far as like getting married and having kids, there's a lot of examples of women at SF State that are scientists, and they're doing just fine with their family. So yes, I think it's possible.
I believe that you can. I mean, I know one of my best role models is a woman scientist, and she has a family, and she's very successful. So I think it can be done. I haven't done it. I hope I can do it in the end, but I think it can be done with the right support and a right, passion about it. You could do it.
I'm married. I have my husband, and hopefully we are going to have a baby soon. So yeah, I think it's possible.
I know that scientists, as a female scientist, you can have a family. I've had plenty of mentors as an undergraduate here and as a master's student. Dr. Marquez Magaña, who was the person who ran the lab, so my PI, and the person who I attribute a lot of my accomplishments in science to. She is a woman scientist of color who has 2 boys in high school, and her husband is a doctor, so I know it can be done.
As a woman, that was one of the barriers I think that turned a lot of people away, is, oh, it looks so hard. Can you have kids? Can you have a family? And totally. I have 2 kids, and it's great. It's a great part of my life.
Why should I consider becoming a scientist?
I think young girls should consider becoming a scientist because I think it's one of the careers that is really fun, really flexible. It's just a career where you can decide what you want to do, what time you want to go to work.
Being a scientist, you learn a lot about not only just human body, but plants and animals and ecosystem. And every day you just walk around and you just look at things, and it's just in a different light because you understand more about what's going on with plants. Why are they green, and why do they wilt? When I walk, why am I using the muscles I'm using? It's very enlightening, and it opens your eyes a lot more to the world around you.
Especially as a woman of color, you have so many different questions to ask in the field, and so many different perspectives that you can bring to science that I think it's a wonderful gift that we have that you should share with everybody. So you should all become scientists.
Because it's cool! It really is. It's so much fun. It's a lot of fun.
You don't have to be a professional scientist. You don't have to go and get a PhD to be a scientist. You can go and get your bachelor's in biology. You can go and get your master's in physiology, whatever it is, and you can go out and teach and become a teacher, and you're still a scientist.
Yeah, well, 10 to the 9 or 10 to the 12 bacteria.
And I think everybody needs to know a little bit about science, just because it's so important and it's really everywhere.
I think science research is important because I think human beings are naturally curious about how things work and why does it work. So before we go insane asking these questions, there are people who can actually answer them.
So why should you become a scientist? I'm very biased because I think it's an awesome career and I love figuring out things. But if you are a curious person and you really like knowing how things work, or if you like asking questions about the world around you and discovering new things, then I think science is an awesome career. And you, as a woman of color, will bring in a perspective that is very much needed in science. And it would be a great career for you. And if you enjoy science and math, then I would highly recommend it.
I want to study science. Do you have any advice?
If you want to do well in science, you need to have a very strong academic foundation. And sometimes some schools have stronger programs and some schools don't. Do your best to take advantage of the science resources at your high school.
Always work hard in whatever it is that you want to do. Try to keep your grades up. That's really going to help you in the future. I didn't always keep my grades up, and I realized that, at the end you have to make up for it. It's a harder struggle.
Put your lessons first, your homework first. One of your first questions, what was junior high like? I love playing games. In high school was like, I love to dance. Those are important things, but when you get to college, you have to put your studies first. No matter how fun you are, how many friends you have.
Don't be a follower of people. I know it's definitely hard in school just to kind of not stand out. That ruins your chances at succeeding more in life, is if you're just following everybody else. You should make up your own path.
But not to let anybody's opinions of you influence you or determine the way that you feel about yourself. Work and study very, very hard, and have fun.
Never let anybody tell you that you can't do something, because you can do whatever you put your mind to. Somebody tells you can't do it, that should just give you like more energy and more power to just go out and prove them wrong.
Take those advanced placement science classes. They're hard and they're going to be scary, but if you take those classes, then it will help you do well in college. Because in order to become a scientist, you need to go to college. And you need to not only go to college, but you need to do well.
If you fail a class, don't think that you're not going to be a doctor anymore. So don't give up.
My advice would be that you should try it. And if you do want to be a scientist, I think the best thing is to find other scientists, especially women of color, and get their advice. Because a lot of us, we go through a lot of obstacles. There's, our families, and there's peer pressure out there to do other things. And if you really want to do science, just really ask your teachers, what can you do with what you like?
Do any volunteer that they want to. For example, if they like animals, they can work in any shelter with animals.
Try it out, do it for free. Sometimes you can get paid for it. And you learn so much from the person that you work with. You also learn whether you like it or not.
I was able to volunteer in high school at the Exploratorium, and that helped me decide that I wanted to study bacteria.
Do not give up. Always believe in yourself. Find mentors who can support you. It is so important to have support and mentorship throughout in middle school and high school and college. Always seek out mentors who are going to be supportive.
Never be afraid to ask for help or ask questions. And if you ever feel like you're stuck in a situation, just go talk to your teachers. They're there to help you, and they're happy to help you. So don't ever be afraid to go ask for help.
Never forget where you've come from, because you've worked hard and you've been through a lot. And if you remember that, it will keep you strong throughout your career.